Who has it better than we do?
Nobody.
Cowboys don't have it better than we do. Todd Archer, ESPN NFL Nation reporter, covering the Cowboys since 2003. Well, I didn't think we would get here, but we got here. How did we get here, Todd?
You know, Jerry Jones has a line that he likes to use where he says, "Don't let your money get mad." I think his money got mad in this situation when he wasn't able to work out the contract directly with Micah Parsons. There were no negotiations after that, no offers sent from the team to the agent, nothing from the agent back to the team. And Micah's side made one last push at the start of the week or the end of last week to say, "Hey, can we get going on this? Let's do a deal." And Jerry flat out told him, "No, you're playing on the fifth-year option, and then we'll see what happens after the season. We'll franchise tag you." That kind of set all the balls in motion towards this trade with Green Bay. A number of suitors that we were told were involved. The Cowboys were kind of limited to who they could be because that team needed cap room. That team needed a defensive player they could get in return. And it came together pretty quickly once the Packers were able to come to the agreement with Parsons on the long-term contract.
But, Todd, let's go back to March. If you know you're not going to sign him, at least create some leverage, a bidding war going into the draft. That's what I don't understand. If he does
I don't understand
that,
it either.
then maybe I understand the rationale, but still, you traded away, one of the 5 best defensive players in the game, a trajectory for the Hall of Fame. You get Kenny Clark, who's over 30, and you get 2 late first-round picks more than likely. I just don't understand how Jerry can, with a straight face, say the team is better now today than it was yesterday.
Well, they're better for the playoffs. He didn't say when they were going to make the playoffs, I guess, right? If it would be this year or not. But I asked Jerry that question. If you knew in the beginning of April that you had this pushback on the agreement that you and Micah had from the agent, why didn't you make the deal before the draft when you had the opportunity to help your team more theoretically in 2025 by getting a player and multiple draft picks as well? So, and his answer was convoluted and Jerry-like, and I really don't know what it was. But Stephen Jones said, well, the draft is in April too. This was the beginning of the month and the end of the month. You had at least 3 weeks where you could have worked that out and gotten to a deal. They chose not to do it. They went this route. And in their mind, this is the best that they could do right now. And they knew that if Micah Parsons wasn't going to play week 1 against Philadelphia, that it would have been a situation that would have been onerous for the entire year. And they didn't want to put Brian Schottenheimer in part in that situation.
But we've talked about this before. If the Cowboys have a traditional general manager who has power, who has teeth, do we get to this point in this, situation where you're parting with Micah Parsons?
Well, I think in that situation, the owner says, "Hey, man, too bad, work it out." That's what the owner would say, because you can't convince an owner who's not the general manager that team would be better without Micah Parsons that particular season. So that's where the everybody who says Jerry needs to fire the GM, well, this is the case where the GM didn't have an owner telling him what to do either.
I just wonder the role that Stephen Jones played in this, because Jerry loves to be a buddy to the players. Are Stephen's fingerprints on this that he might have been the one that convinced Jerry to trade away Micah Parsons?
I wouldn't cast the blame on Stephen Jones. Jerry told us that this was a unanimous decision from everybody in the organization that they talked to, including some players that are on the leadership council when we met yesterday. Now, I get it. It's easy to say, of course, everybody's going to tell Jerry, yeah, let's go ahead and do this if that's what Jerry wanted to do.
Wait, but there were players on the Cowboys who co-signed on this to move on from Micah Parsons.
That is what Jerry told us yesterday, that they have a leadership council, players were contacted, and they understood it as well. Whether they were okay with it, maybe a distinction without difference, but they were understanding why the Cowboys had to make the move. And look, there have been teammates in Micah's past, and even probably some in the present, that have been annoyed, might be the best word, by some of the things that he's done. And they all might be little things to some degree. Not putting Dak Prescott in as one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL on your podcast. not working the hardest on the practice field, showing up to the game the other night, eating nachos, lying down on the medical table. All of that stuff might be little stuff, but when you start adding all of that stuff together, I think teammates, again, for sure some former guys, were just annoyed at times by Micah. Great, but they always understood his production on the field is what mattered most.
Thank you, Todd. I know you're busy. Thanks for joining us.
You got it. Thanks, Dan.
Todd Archer, ESPN NFL Nation reporter covering the Cowboys since 2003. Yeah, you're trying to figure this out where you go, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Sure, we're a better team today. It goes back to when Jerry said they were all in. Like, all in what? Like, all in a pile of bleep? Like, what are you all in on? Yeah, Pauline.
I saw your reaction when Todd Archer said that players on the whatever competition committee that they have agreed with this trade. And Jerry Jones said that to the media. Do you believe that?
I mean, I'm going to take Todd at his word, but I can't imagine Dak Prescott or C.D. Lamb, if they're part of the leadership committee, hey, hell yeah, get rid of him. Let's get worse. I don't understand it. Look, there are personalities that you have to put up with. And you balance that by production and personality. It's like Draymond Green. I would have moved on from Draymond Green. I don't want to deal with that personality anymore. When he was great, okay, I can deal with the personality. Did Micah Parsons get to the point? And I know he wasn't universally loved inside that building. He was not. And yes, he has a big mouth. They know all of these things. If you know all of these things and how much it's going to cost you, then trade him. Trade him in March or April. Not now. Rob Demovsky. He's been covering the Packers since 1997. ESPN NFL Nation reporter. What was your reaction to this trade?
Dan, as the week began earlier this week, you sort of had an inkling that this might be a real possibility. In fact, on the day after the cuts, I asked a couple players in the locker room about it, and one of those guys being all-pro safety Xavier McKinney, who just so happens to have the same agent as Micah Parsons. It was not a coincidence that I went up to him. But Xavier, first he looked at me and said, I'm not talking about that. And I'm like, but you know him, right? He goes, I know him. He's a great dude. And that's about all I can say right now. And he smiled at me. I mean, again, at that point, we weren't 100% sure that the Packers were involved or that the Cowboys were even listening. We know now that they have been listening for a little while. And I can tell you this, Dan, from a Packers standpoint, this all started a week or so ago, maybe a little longer. And Brian Gutekunst, the general manager, this is what I was told, walked into Matt LaFleur's office and asked his coach, would you want Micah Parsons? And LaFleur goes, well, of course. And then it took off from there.
How does this not work out for the Packers?
If Parsons gets hurt, it's a disaster, right? Because you paid him all this money. You don't have your draft picks. As long as Micah Parsons is the Micah Parsons that we've seen for the last 4 years, I mean, this is a team, Dan, that has not had a single player with double-digit sacks in a season since the year before Micah Parsons came into the NFL. Their last double-digit sack guy was Zadarius Smith in, I believe it was 2020. Rashawn Gary is a former first-round pick, a good pass rusher that they then gave a second contract to, but quite frankly, has not been as good as they would have hoped. I'm sure they think the addition of Micah Parsons not only gives them Micah Parsons, but it also takes some of the double teams and the attention away from Rashawn Gary. I do think, Todd mentioned Todd Archer mentioned some of the things that go with Micah Parsons. I did talk to somebody this morning in the league who thought, you know what, maybe there is some of that, but this being Green Bay is the perfect place for him. Like, it's all about football here. Yes, he's got a little bit of an entourage, but so does everybody now. And that the Packers infrastructure, their player development, player engagement, security guys, they have the infrastructure to make this work. And, I don't think the Packers would have done it if they didn't feel like that was a big concern.
And this has been kind of unpacker-like. You take a wide receiver in the first round, you take a big swing and you go Micah Parsons. And, have the Packers – have they changed their philosophy?
It's a great question, and I think the answer is yes. And I think it goes back to a couple things. One, on January 16th, that was 4 days after the Packers lost to the Eagles in the playoffs, Brian Gutekunst, the general manager, said in front of us at the podium, it's time we start competing for championships. And then he does what you said, drafts Matthew Golden. The last time they drafted a first-round receiver here was 21 years ago. And then I think there's another factor at play here, and that's the change in presidents. The Packers don't have an owner. They have a team president, and that team president now is Ed Policy because the former president, Mark Murphy, reached the organization's mandatory retirement age of 70. And for those people who don't know Ed Policy but think they know that name sounds familiar, it's Carmen Policy's son. Carmen ran the 49ers for a long time, made a lot of bold moves out there, moved on from Bill Walsh, moved on from Joe Montana. And when we met with Ed Policy in earlier this summer for the first time, he talked about how, he watched his dad make these bold moves that almost always, not always, but almost always turned out for the better at the back end of it. And I don't know if Ed Policy is necessarily, encouraging them to be more aggressive, or those guys just feel like they can be more aggressive with this type of leadership.
Great to talk to you. I know you're busy. Thanks for joining us as always, Rob.
You got it, Dan. We'll be seeing you.
Rob Demovsky. He's been covering the Packers since 1997.